Good evening, all, and welcome back to Dark Fears. Tonight, we descend into the frozen wilderness of America's last frontier, where the isolation that draws people seeking escape becomes the very thing that traps them in nightmares they cannot outrun. Alaska's vast emptiness has always attracted those who want to disappear. But what happens when someone else is doing the hunting? Across 10 true accounts, law enforcement officers, park rangers, and dispatchers share the moments they discovered that the most dangerous predators are not bears or wolves, but the ones who understand that in a land this remote, screams fade into silence before anyone can hear them. If you are new here, make sure to subscribe to Dark Fears for daily true horror content that will keep you up at night. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when the darkness calls. Now, let us step into the shadows of the Alaskan wilderness, where civilization ends and terror begins. My name is Evan Steele, and what happened to me took place in the winter of 2019, when I volunteered for a remote wildlife monitoring assignment near Lake Minchumina, Alaska. I wasn't a thrill seeker, just a biology student trying to complete a research requirement. My goal was simple: track wolf movement, check camera traps, and send weekly reports. Easy, quiet work. Or so I thought. The cabin the state assigned me was a basic wooden structure, about a quarter-mile from the lake. Locals warned me that the ice near the southern side wasn't stable, even in deep winter. But they said it in a strange way, like they weren't warning me about falling in, but about something beneath the ice. On my second night, as temperatures dropped to -30, I heard it, a low, deep cracking sound, not the normal shifting of a frozen lake. This was rhythmic, almost like footsteps. I stepped out with my flashlight. The trees creaked under the cold, the sky pitch black except for a thin green ribbon of aurora flickering overhead. And then I heard it again. Crack, crack, crack. Something was walking across the lake. I followed the sound with my light until it landed on the ice surface, and I swear, for a moment, I saw something large moving beneath the frozen sheet, pacing in a slow circle. Then it stopped directly in front of me, and the ice breathed. I backed away from the lake so fast I nearly tripped over my own boots. My flashlight flickered in the cold, the beam slicing across the ice as the shape beneath it slowly drifted away. It didn't swim. It didn't surge or slither. It walked, heavy, deliberate steps echoing through the frozen sheet like a muted drum. Inside the cabin, I slammed the door and pressed my back against it. My heart thudded in my ears as the temperature inside seemed to drop even further. For hours I sat awake, staring at the window that faced the lake. Every few minutes, I heard that same rhythmic cracking in the distance. By morning, I convinced myself I had exaggerated what I saw. Maybe it was a large fish, or the ice shifting under its own weight. I told myself anything that made sense, until I checked the first camera trap. The device had been placed near the tree line overlooking the lake. When I scrolled through the night footage, I froze. At exactly 2:14 a.m., the same time I had been outside. The camera captured a faint disturbance beneath the lake's surface, a dark silhouette gliding slowly toward the cabin. But that wasn't the part that made my skin crawl. Just before the clip ended, the silhouette stopped, almost like it was turning upward toward the camera, and two pale, bulbous shapes reflecting moonlight stared back. Eyes, looking directly into the lens. For the rest of that day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from the lake. Every time the wind shifted, I imagined a pair of pale, unblinking eyes staring through the ice. I told myself I was being paranoid, that isolation was playing tricks on me. But that night proved me wrong. Around 11 p.m., the cabin temperature suddenly plummeted. Frost crawled across the inside of the windows like thin white veins. My breath fogged instantly. I went to check the heater, thinking it had died. But when I opened the metal panel, warm air rushed out. The heater was working perfectly. The cold wasn't coming from inside. It was seeping in from the direction of the lake. Then came the sound again. Crack, crack, crack. Slow, heavy, measured. Something was walking toward the shore. I killed the lights and crouched under the window, peeking just enough to see the lake through a thin sliver of frost. At first, I saw nothing but the flat white expanse. Then, faintly, a long black line appeared on the surface. A crack stretching from the center of the lake straight toward the cabin. And it was growing longer. The ice was splitting open in a perfect line, as if something beneath it was dragging a finger across the frozen sheet, tracing a path directly to me. When the crack reached the shoreline, the footsteps stopped. But something else started. A soft, slow scraping sound, right outside the cabin wall. The scraping moved slowly along the outer wall, a deliberate, steady drag, like claws or something hard being pulled across the wood. My lungs tightened. I didn't dare breathe too loudly. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but there was nowhere to go. No neighbors, no roads, no phone signal, only the lake, and whatever had crawled out of it. The scraping stopped directly beneath the window. Silence. Then tap. A single knuckle-like tap on the glass. I froze. My mind raced through every possibility. A bear, a moose, frost cracking, anything natural. But none of those creatures tap. None of them feel around windows like they're searching for a weak spot. I forced myself to look. I rose slowly, inch by inch, until my eyes lined up with the bottom of the frosted pane. At first, all I saw was white frost. Then something pushed lightly against it from the other side, smearing the frost in a circular motion. Slowly, the smear widened, revealing a dark, distorted shape pressed against the glass. It wasn't a face. Not exactly. It was too smooth, too pale. Skin stretched tight over something human-shaped, but not human-proportioned. And where eyes should have been, there were two bulging, glassy orbs, the same ones I'd seen on the camera footage. The thing leaned closer, and then it smiled. A thin, stretching, unnatural curve, like it was imitating something it had seen humans do. But its lips didn't move, because it didn't have any. I stumbled backward, knocking over a metal lantern as the thing pressed harder against the window. The wood frame creaked under the pressure. A spiderweb of cracks spread across the glass, thin but growing. It wasn't trying to break in with brute force, it was testing the structure, pushing gently, evenly, like it knew exactly how much pressure the window could take. I grabbed my rifle even though I knew deep down it wouldn't matter. Whatever that thing was, it didn't move like anything from this world. The pressure suddenly stopped. Silence again. Then, slowly, almost politely, the thing dragged its hand down the window, leaving long streaks in the frost. Its fingers were too long, too jointed. Each one left a thin, wet trail behind, water dripping from its skin even though the temperature was minus 30 degrees. It stepped away from the window. I heard the soft crunch of snow. I rushed to the other window facing the lake and peered out cautiously. And my stomach flipped. The thing was gliding, not walking, back toward the lake, its pale limbs barely touching the ground. When it reached the shoreline, it bent unnaturally forward, almost folding in half, and slipped underneath the ice sheet without breaking it. The ice seemed to swallow it whole. Only a long, glowing trail beneath the frozen surface remained, moving back toward the center. I thought it was over. But around 3 a.m., the radio crackled to life. A voice whispered through the static, "Evan, it remembers you." I didn't sleep the rest of that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that glowing trail beneath the ice, inching closer to the cabin. The whisper over the radio repeated, soft, insistent, calling my name in a way that made my blood run cold. By dawn, I convinced myself the entire event had been a hallucination. But then I stepped outside. The snow was pristine, except for a single set of footprints that led directly from the lake to my cabin door. Oddly, there were only 3 toes visible in each print, long, narrow, perfectly spaced. Nothing in Alaskan wildlife made prints like that. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a moose had stepped unusually, or an animal trapped in some ice formation. But deep down, I knew better. Later that morning, I checked my remaining camera traps. All footage between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. was corrupted in a strange way, like something had intentionally erased it. Only one clip survived, a shadow moving quickly across the lake, faster than any human could run, stopping periodically as if watching me. By nightfall, I noticed something chilling outside, a dark silhouette just at the edge of the tree line. It didn't move. It just stood, watching the cabin as the aurora danced above. I couldn't tell if it was waiting, hunting, or simply marking its territory. And then the scratching began again. This time, from inside the cabin, the scratching grew louder, echoing through the cabin walls, and it wasn't slow anymore. It was fast, chaotic, deliberate. My pulse pounded in my ears. I grabbed a heavy cast iron pan, clutching it like a weapon, and crept toward the source. The sound stopped as soon as I reached the corner where the door met the floor. Nothing. Then a soft breath brushed against my neck. Ice cold. Human-shaped? I don't know. My body seized, and when I turned, the kitchen was empty. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination. But then I noticed something I had never seen before. Long, dark streaks smeared across the wooden floor, like someone, or something, had slid across the room on all fours. And at the edge of the floor, closest to the door, one of the streaks ended in a claw-like mark deep into the wood. I couldn't move. I just stared, frozen. Minutes passed, hours maybe. Then I heard the lake ice groan in the distance, far away. That same rhythmic crack, 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 returning. It was moving, coming closer again, and suddenly, the cabin door rattled violently. I ran to the window and shined my flashlight toward the lake. There was no shape visible, only the faint glowing line beneath the ice, moving like a predator plotting its next step. I realized then that it hadn't left. It was only patiently waiting. Sleep was impossible. Every creak, every whistle of wind made me flinch. I barricaded the cabin door with furniture and even nailed planks across it, but it didn't feel like protection, just a delay. Around 2 a.m., my radio crackled again. That whisper, "It knows your name, Evan. You shouldn't have stayed." Then came the knock. 3 deliberate knocks on the roof this time. Slow, heavy, impossible. I grabbed my rifle again and stepped outside. The snow was deep, my boots disappearing with each step. The aurora danced overhead like green fire, casting eerie shadows. Nothing visible, just the lake, flat and frozen. Until I saw it. Beneath the ice, directly in front of the cabin, The glowing silhouette rose slowly, shaping into a grotesque imitation of a human form. Its limbs elongated unnaturally, bending at angles no living thing should, fingers dragging across the ice surface. It paused, looking straight at me. My reflection in the ice stared back at the creature. And then it smiled that impossible grin again. I ran back inside, barricading everything behind me, trembling, praying it would leave. But I knew it wouldn't. It was learning, watching, waiting. The night dragged on. Every sound outside made my stomach twist. Every shadow inside the cabin seemed alive. By dawn, I had scribbled frantic notes, documenting every crack, every glow, every whisper. I needed a plan. I had to leave. I couldn't spend another night here. As I prepared my small snowmobile, I noticed it. The ice on the lake was no longer pristine. A single winding path of cracks led directly from the center of the lake to the shore, widening as if something huge had traveled along it. I hesitated. The path was clear, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that stepping onto it would invite the thing back. I took a deep breath, revving the snowmobile, and raced along the shore, staying far from the ice. Every tree, every hill, every shadow felt like it was bending toward me, watching me flee. And then, at the edge of the tree line, I glanced back. The glowing trail had stopped. But now, there were footprints leading from the ice, following me. Long, narrow, three-toed. Watching, waiting. I realized then, it wasn't just under the ice anymore. It was tracking me. I made it back to the nearest ranger station by noon. Shaking, I told my story. They laughed at first. Wolves, ice cracking, hallucinations in isolation. But when they checked my cabin later, they found something chilling. The ice on the lake bore the exact same glowing trail I had described, stretching from center to shore. And there were the three-toed footprints I had seen following me. No one could explain it, and they didn't want to. I returned home permanently after that winter. But sometimes, on cold nights when the wind howls through the city streets, I hear a familiar crack, crack, crack beneath my floorboards in dreams. I can't tell if it's memory or warning. I never set foot on frozen lakes again. And I don't go anywhere in the wilderness alone. Because the thing under the ice is patient. It remembers. And it waits. Some say it only hunts in Alaska. I know better. It's still learning. My name is Samantha Reed, and this happened during a solo hiking trip in the Chugach Mountains of Alaska in the dead of winter, 2020. I had spent years planning this expedition, craving the solitude and raw beauty of the wilderness. I wanted to push myself, to disconnect completely from the world. The first few days were incredible. Snow-crusted pines, frozen waterfalls, the northern lights shimmering across endless peaks. But on the third night, as I set up camp near a secluded ridge, things started feeling off. The silence was too complete. Even the wind seemed hesitant. As I gathered firewood, I heard it. A soft, scraping sound behind me. At first, I thought it was the wind, moving branches. But then the sound repeated, slower this time. Deliberate. I froze. There was no one else in the area. No other hikers, no animals that could make that sound. My pulse quickened. I grabbed my flashlight and scanned the tree line. A shadow moved. Something pale, stretched, and humanoid. It disappeared behind a grove of birches before I could get a clear look. I convinced myself it was a trick of the light. But when I returned to my tent, I found footprints in the snow. circling my camp. Only problem, I hadn't heard anyone approach. I stayed awake that night, heart hammering, flashlight in hand. Every crack of a branch or crunch of snow made me flinch. I told myself it was an animal, a fox maybe, or a wandering wolf. But instinct screamed at me that this wasn't natural. Hours passed. Around 2 a.m., I noticed movement outside the tent, shadows shifting between the trees. Something was pacing, circling. I whispered into the cold night, "I know you're there. I'm not alone." No answer. Then I heard a whisper, not the wind. A faint, hissing sound, almost human. "Leave. Now." I froze. My flashlight shook as I swung it toward the sound, illuminating only trees and deep snow. Nothing visible. But the footprints had multiplied, forming an incomplete circle around my tent, stopping at irregular intervals, as if whatever it was had crouched or crawled. I grabbed my emergency flare, my hands trembling, and waved it into the trees. A faint reflection of something moved, too tall and thin to be human, vanishing into the darkness. I realized with a sickening certainty that I was being stalked. I didn't sleep again that night. By morning, I was exhausted, but determined to stay put until sunrise. My water supply was limited, and the nearest ranger station was still miles away. I stepped out cautiously, scanning the surrounding woods. The footprints from the night before had disappeared, leaving no trace, as if the snow had swallowed them. I convinced myself that fear was playing tricks on me. Maybe I had imagined everything. But deep down, I knew the feeling of being watched hadn't left. Around mid-morning, while inspecting the trail, I noticed broken branches, snapped low, as if something tall had passed through recently. And then I heard it. Faint humming, soft and melodic, weaving through the trees. It wasn't a song I recognized. It was wrong, alien, almost inhuman. My pulse quickened as I followed the sound cautiously, flashlight and camera ready. Suddenly, the humming stopped. The forest fell silent, heavier than before. I turned to leave and froze. A figure stood 50 feet away, barely visible among the birches. Pale skin, limbs unnaturally long, eyes glowing faintly in the dim winter light. It didn't move. It didn't blink. It was simply waiting. I backed away slowly, realizing it had been watching me the entire morning without a single sound. I ran back to the tent, heart pounding like a drum. Inside, I tried to calm myself. I packed supplies frantically, debating whether to try hiking to the nearest ranger post or to wait out the day. The creature hadn't followed me inside, but the sense of being hunted was overwhelming. By mid-afternoon, the wind picked up, howling through the trees. Snow swirled around the tent, masking any tracks I might leave. I realized I had no choice. I had to move. Slowly, I unzipped the tent, flashlight in hand, and stepped into the blinding snowstorm. The first few steps were fine. Then I heard it. A soft crack under the snow behind me. Something was following, staying just beyond visibility, stepping carefully. I stopped and spun around. Nothing. Just endless white snow and the faint outlines of trees. But then I noticed the tracks in the snow. They weren't human. The prints were long, thin, and unevenly jointed, like something crawling with extra limbs. Panic surged through me. I ran, trying to put as much distance as possible between myself and whatever this was. But every step I took, I could feel it. It was mirroring me, staying the same distance behind, patient, unhurried, as if studying my movements. The sun began to set, and the forest became darker, colder, and more alien with every passing second. I stumbled upon a narrow ravine, partially hidden under snow and ice. Desperate, I climbed down, hoping it would block the creature from following. My breaths were shallow, freezing in the air. Every snap of a branch echoed like a gunshot in the stillness. Then I heard it again. A whisper, low and cold, drifting through the ravine. "Why are you here?" "Alone." My stomach turned. It knew my name. Or at least, it knew me. I froze, peering into the darkness. My flashlight caught a glimpse of movement. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the ice walls of the ravine. The creature's pale, elongated form emerged, moving with terrifying precision, its eyes reflecting the faint light. It didn't speak again. It didn't chase immediately. It simply followed. Every time I moved, it mirrored me, maintaining perfect distance, its presence pressing against my mind like a cold weight. By the time night fell, I found myself trapped at the bottom of the ravine, the snowstorm thickening. The creature loomed at the edge, watching silently, waiting. I had no idea how I would survive the night. Night had fully fallen, and the ravine was a maze of shadows and ice. My flashlight flickered as if it were failing, leaving me in near darkness. Every step I took, I could feel it, the creature, watching, waiting, calculating. I tried to climb back out, but the icy walls offered little purchase. My gloves were soaked, my breath frosted over, and the panic in my chest was suffocating. Then it moved, slowly. From the top of the ravine, the pale figure descended, its limbs bending in impossible ways. Each step made the snow under its feet crunch in unnatural silence. It didn't make a sound, yet I felt it approaching through my bones. My hands trembled uncontrollably. I thought of calling for help, but my radio was dead. No signal, no one within miles. I scrambled behind a boulder, praying it wouldn't notice me. The silhouette stopped, tilting its head in a way that felt intelligent, almost curious. It scanned the ravine like a predator studying prey. And then, slowly, it disappeared into the shadows, leaving only silence, the snow undisturbed, and the icy cold pressing down. I realized it wasn't gone. It was waiting for the next moment, the next opportunity to study me, to learn my limits. I spent hours in that freezing ravine, shivering, half delirious from exhaustion. Every whisper of wind sounded like its voice, calling my name, taunting me. I knew I couldn't stay there. I had to move. As dawn approached, I carefully ascended to a narrow ledge that might lead out. My flashlight caught a glimpse of footprints along the edge, the same unnatural three-toed, elongated tracks I had seen before. They stopped suddenly, as if the creature had crouched, waiting. I froze, heart pounding. Then came the faintest whisper. "You can't leave. Not yet." I looked up and saw it standing at the edge of the cliff, watching me. Its long arms hung limply, almost like it was mimicking a human posture. Its glowing eyes pierced the dawn light, unblinking, unfeeling, yet somehow intelligent. I realized that running blindly would only play into its game. Slowly, deliberately, I began moving along the ledge, keeping my eyes trained on the creature. It mirrored my movements perfectly, never breaking stride, never losing focus. Every step was calculated terror. My mind screamed, my body obeyed, and I swore I could feel its gaze in my very soul. I found a small overhang that offered some shelter. I crouched there, trying to catch my breath. My body ached, frostbite beginning to set in. I dared not look down. But when I finally glanced at the ravine floor, the footprints were gone. Yet I could feel it, still watching. I debated staying put and hoping it left. But instinct told me that waiting would only seal my fate. Slowly, I continued along the ledge, clinging to rocks and frozen tree roots. Every sound was amplified. The cracking ice below, snow shifting, distant birds calling. Then I saw movement in the trees ahead. Shadows twisting unnaturally, branches bending without wind. The creature wasn't directly in front of me, but it was guiding me, or perhaps herding me towards something. I stumbled and slid down a patch of ice. My heart raced as I tried to regain balance, and the figure appeared at the top of the slope, watching silently, its head tilting in curiosity. I understood then. It wasn't just hunting. It was studying, testing boundaries, learning how far it could push me before fear took over. I knew the night ahead would determine if I survived, or if the Alaskan wilderness claimed me as it had so many others. Nightfall returned faster than I expected. Snow began falling heavily, and I could barely see past a few feet. I crouched under an overhang, heart racing, knowing it was still somewhere above me. Every gust of wind sounded like its whisper, calling my name, mocking me. I gathered courage and decided to descend carefully, following a faint trail that might lead to a river valley. Every step was agony. The cold gnawed at me, muscles screaming, snowflakes stinging my face. And then I heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, above me. I froze. The sound stopped. My pulse thundered. I dared not move, barely dared to breathe. Then a shadow appeared on the snow above the ledge. Long, thin, towering, watching, waiting, unblinking. I could see the pale face now, the hollow eyes, the impossible limbs. It did not attack. It simply observed. But I knew in my heart, if I made a single mistake, it would be the last mistake I ever made. I waited until it retreated slightly, then slid down, inch by inch, into the valley below. My legs burned, my mind screaming. But I kept moving, praying the creature would not follow me through the snowstorm. The valley offered the first real hope I had in days, or at least, I thought it did. By dawn, I stumbled onto a frozen river that led toward a ranger post several miles away. Exhausted, frostbitten, I dared not stop. My mind was a haze of fear and determination. Behind me, I thought I saw movement. Faint, shadowy, at the edge of the tree line. My instinct screamed. It hadn't given up. It had followed me all night, just far enough to observe without revealing its presence. I kept moving, ignoring pain, ignoring exhaustion, praying the post was close. Hours later, I finally saw the faint outline of the ranger station through the morning mist. Relief surged, but with it, an unnatural feeling of dread. That familiar pressure at the base of my skull, as if invisible eyes were watching even here. I reached the station, collapsed, and warned the rangers. They were skeptical at first, until I showed them the unusual tracks in the snow. Elongated, three-toed, impossible to identify. They said some Alaskan legends were meant to remain stories, that some things in the woods should never be chased. I never returned to the Chugach Mountains. But even now, I know that the figure still roams the Alaskan wilderness, studying, waiting, and perhaps hunting. And sometimes, in the quiet moments, I still hear it whisper my name. My name is David Harlow, and this happened the winter I decided to spend a week alone in a remote cabin on Crimson Lake, deep in the Alaskan wilderness. I thought solitude would be peaceful, a way to escape the chaos of city life and reconnect with nature. The first 2 days were idyllic. Thick pine forests dusted with snow, frozen lake waters reflecting the pale winter sun, and silence so deep it felt alive. I was entirely alone. But on the evening of the third day, as I settled by the fireplace, I heard a faint tapping at the cabin window. At first, I thought it was just ice shifting or a branch brushing the glass. Then I heard it again. More deliberate, 3 slow taps, evenly spaced. My stomach turned. I peered through the frost, expecting to see nothing. But there was a figure, pale, impossibly tall, leaning just enough to be visible behind the condensation. Its eyes dark and reflective, like pools of oil. I backed away slowly, heart hammering. I convinced myself it must be a traveler or local lost in the snow. But when I stepped outside to call for help, there was no one. Only my footprints and the frozen lake, stretching endlessly into the shadowed tree line. And then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Footprints that didn't match mine and didn't belong to any animal I knew. I barricaded the cabin doors and windows as the sun dipped behind the mountains, plunging the forest into deep shadows. The taps returned, this time from multiple windows, soft but rhythmic, like a sinister heartbeat echoing through the cabin walls. I tried to call the ranger station, but there was no signal. No phone, no internet. Total isolation. Then I saw it, a shadow moving across the frozen lake. At first, I thought it was a trick of the fading light. But it moved with purpose, gliding, not walking. Its form was unnaturally tall, pale, limbs bending at impossible angles. I ducked behind the cabin, holding my breath, praying it wouldn't notice me. But I could feel it, watching, waiting. Hours passed. The tap stopped. The shadow vanished. The wind picked up, moaning through the trees like a chorus of ghosts. I didn't sleep that night. Every snap of ice on the lake, every rustle of snow sent my heart racing. By morning, curiosity and terror mingled. I stepped outside cautiously. The snow around the cabin was disturbed, elongated footprints, 3-toed, unevenly spaced, leading toward the tree line. I realized something was living here. Something that knew I was alone, knew where I would be. The next evening, the isolation of the lake felt heavier, oppressive. I tried to distract myself by chopping wood, but every swing echoed strangely as if the forest were swallowing the sound. By dusk, fog rolled in thick from the frozen lake, cloaking everything in a white blur. That's when I heard the whispering. Not words, more like a faint, breathy hum drifting from the tree line. I stepped onto the porch, squinting through the fog. Nothing. I turned to go back inside and froze. There, standing at the edge of visibility, was the figure. Taller than before, leaner. Its limbs hung loosely as though they didn't have proper joints. And its head, it was tilted far to the side, almost touching its shoulder. I blinked, and it vanished. Simply gone, dissolved into the fog. I stumbled backward, locking the door. My heart thundered. But when I turned to check the window, I choked on my breath. A handprint, not human. Long fingers, spread unnaturally wide, pressed into the frost on the window from the outside. I wiped the glass with my sleeve. The print was ice cold, the frost freshly disturbed. It had been inches from me while I was on the porch. That night, I slept with the axe beside my bed, knowing the cabin walls were the only thing between me and whatever hunted the lake. The fourth day brought a snowstorm that buried the lake and forest under white silence. The cabin creaked under the weight of snow, and every sound made me jump. I stayed inside most of the day, but near noon, I felt a strange vibration through the floorboards. A soft, rhythmic thud, thud, thud. Footsteps under the cabin. My blood turned cold. The foundation sat on wooden stilts, giving animals space underneath, but nothing that size could possibly be down there. The thudding circled the cabin slowly, as if whatever it was exploring. I crouched near the floor, trying to listen. Through a crack in the boards, barely visible, something pale moved. Slow, controlled. A hand, long fingers curling upward, dragging across the bottom of the cabin floor. I crawled away, breathing hard, grabbing the axe with shaking hands. Hours passed. The footsteps stopped. But when the storm calmed enough for me to look outside, I found something that shattered me. All around the cabin, in a perfect circle, were footprints. The same three-toed, elongated tracks. But not just one set. Dozens. Some large, some smaller. Some impossibly massive. Whatever was stalking Crimson Lake, it wasn't alone. And now they knew exactly where I slept. I considered leaving that night, storm or not. But the lake was too dangerous to cross in the dark, and the woods felt like a death trap. I waited until morning and packed quickly, forcing myself not to look at the surrounding footprints as I prepared my gear. Before leaving, I checked the map. The nearest ranger outpost was 11 miles away, doable if I kept moving and didn't stop. But when I stepped outside, something new awaited me on the porch. Carved into the wood, deep, deliberate, a symbol, circular with branching lines like skeletal fingers reaching outward, not natural, not weather-made, a message, a warning, or a countdown. My breath hitched. The snow around the porch was disturbed, as if something had crouched there for hours, carving, watching. I moved fast, forcing myself toward the tree line. But with every step, I felt the presence again, like eyes tracing my movements from all angles. Halfway down the trail, the forest grew unnervingly silent. No birds, no wind, just stillness. I turned around. Across the frozen lake, multiple figures now stood in the open, tall, pale, motionless, watching me leave, not chasing, not approaching, just observing, as if they were letting me go for reasons I didn't want to understand. I pushed deeper into the forest, my breath forming shaky clouds in the freezing air. Every few minutes, I checked over my shoulder, half expecting the figures to follow. But they remained distant, statues on the frozen lake. Somehow, that was even worse. By midday, the trail became harder to follow. Snow clung to branches like heavy white hands, bending them low. My legs burned from trudging through knee-deep drifts. Each step felt slower, heavier. Then I heard it. A crack, sharp, close. I spun around. Nothing but trees, another crack. This time to my left. The sounds moved with me, shadowing my path. Not footsteps. More like joints popping, bones stretching, as if something was adjusting itself to fit between the trees. My heart slammed as I picked up speed. But the faster I went, the more the sounds multiplied. Crack, crack, crack in front, behind, to the sides. They were hurting me, steering me off the trail. I stumbled into a clearing and froze. There, carved into the snow, was the same symbol from the cabin porch. Perfectly shaped, but larger, maybe 10 feet wide. The snow inside it was disturbed, as if something had dragged itself in circles around the design, over and over. A warning, a trap, or a boundary. I backed away slowly, pulse pounding. That's when I saw a figure crouched in a tree above me, its limbs wrapped unnaturally around the branches, head tilted completely upside down, watching. I didn't breathe. The creature's upside-down head twitched as if it were sniffing the air. Its mouth stretched open slowly, too slowly, revealing rows of small, needle-fine teeth. The sound it made wasn't a growl. It wasn't a hiss. It was a whine, like something starving. I backed away carefully, boots crunching softly in the snow. The creature's head snapped towards me the moment I moved. Every muscle in my body seized. Then another noise came, farther away. A distant, echoing call, almost melodic. like something summoning it. The thing in the tree twisted its limbs, rotating in a way no spine should. Then it scurried higher, disappearing into the thick branches overhead. I didn't wait to see if it would return. I bolted. Branches whipped my face. Snow filled my boots. The forest felt alive, watching, shifting, urging me deeper. I tripped over a fallen tree, landing hard. As I scrambled up, I noticed something half buried in the snow. A torn piece of bright orange fabric. A jacket sleeve. Fresh, human. My stomach dropped. I brushed the snow aside, revealing more: a backpack strap, a glove, and what looked like drag marks leading between the trees. Someone else had been here recently, and whatever was hunting me had been hunting them too. Following the drag marks felt reckless, but leaving them felt worse. Maybe the missing person was alive. Maybe I wasn't alone in this nightmare. I followed the trail cautiously, heart pounding, axe in hand. The marks led me into a narrow ravine where the snow felt strangely warm, as if the ground beneath exhaled heat. Sweat formed under my jacket despite the freezing air. Then I heard breathing. Not mine, deeper, raspy, labored. I crouched behind a rock, peering around it. There, lying in a shallow pit dug into the snow, was a man. Mid-40s, bearded, wearing a torn orange winter coat. His leg was shredded, clawed, or bitten, but he was alive. Barely. "Help," he whispered, eyes wide with terror. "Don't let them take me back." I rushed to him. "Who? What happened?" His gaze darted wildly around the ravine. "They come from under the ice. They watch. They wait. They..." A clicking sound echoed from above. Sharp, metallic, dangerously close. The man grabbed my arm desperately. "They don't kill right away," he hissed. "They learn you, save you." Before I could ask what he meant, a pale hand reached over the rock above us, fingers impossibly long, nails black and curved. I froze as another hand appeared, then another. At least 3 creatures perched above us, their shadows merging into one nightmarish shape. The creatures descended with terrifying silence, crawling down the rock face like pale spiders. The injured man clawed at my jacket. "Run," he whispered, tears freezing on his lashes. "Just run." But I couldn't leave him. Not like this. I swung the axe, hitting one creature's arm. The blade barely cut its skin, but the thing recoiled with a shrill, unnatural screech that echoed across the ravine. The others paused, watching me, studying me, not afraid, merely curious. Then, without warning, they lunged. I dragged the man behind a cluster of boulders. The creatures swarmed the pit where he'd been lying moments earlier, sniffing the snow, digging into it like animals searching for a buried scent. "Please," the man begged weakly, "don't let them take me." But his voice faded, not because he stopped speaking, but because the forest itself went silent again. Not a sound, not even wind. The creatures lifted their heads in unison, listening, sensing. Then, as if answering some unheard command, they retreated. One by one, they climbed back up the ravine wall and disappeared into the trees, leaving us trembling in the snow. The man went limp beside me. I checked his pulse. Faint, but present. I hauled him onto my shoulder, determined to get him out of this cursed forest. I didn't know it then, but the real horror was still ahead. I carried the injured man for nearly an hour, stumbling through the deepening snow. He drifted in and out of consciousness, muttering the same phrase again and again. "They marked you. They marked you." I didn't understand. Not until I reached a small clearing and saw my reflection in a sheet of ice covering a fallen log. A symbol was smeared across my jacket. The same symbol carved on the porch, the same symbol in the snow circle. except this one was drawn in blood. Not mine. His. The creatures hadn't chased us, because they didn't need to. They had marked me for later. For when I was alone. Panic surged through me. I pushed harder, forcing my way toward the ranger outpost. When I finally saw the radio tower rising through the tree line, my knees nearly buckled with relief. I stumbled inside the outpost cabin, slamming the door behind me. The man collapsed on the floor. I grabbed the emergency radio. It crackled to life instantly. But before I could speak, before I could even breathe, a soft tapping started on the window. 3 slow taps, then 3 more. I turned. Across the snowy clearing, pale figures stood silently among the trees. Dozens of them. Watching, waiting, patient. They weren't chasing me. They were reminding me. The marked always returned to Crimson Lake, one way or another. Bear Creek Valley was known for 2 things: breathtaking views and people going missing without explanation. When my cousin Daniel disappeared there in late October, the search teams found only his backpack, ripped open, claw marks across the fabric, and his camera smashed against a tree. No blood, no tracks, no sign of him. The police assumed he fell into the river, but I knew Daniel. He'd spent half his life hiking Alaska's backcountry. He didn't make careless mistakes, and he never traveled without his GPS. So I went to look for him myself. The further I drove toward Bear Creek, the more unsettling the surroundings became. Frost clung to the branches in thick, white layers, and the trees leaned over the narrow road like they were trying to shut out the sky. The wind carried a low moaning sound that didn't feel natural. By the time I reached the trailhead, the sun was already sinking behind the mountains. The snow crunched loudly under my boots as I set out, following the faint markings Daniel had posted on his map. The forest felt heavier than usual, as if the cold itself had weight. After about an hour, I found it. A small wooden cabin sitting alone in a clearing, half buried in snow. But something was wrong. The smoke rising from the chimney was black, and Daniel's orange jacket was hanging on the porch railing, gently swaying in the wind, even though there was no wind at all. I approached the cabin cautiously, my breath puffing in icy clouds. The orange jacket on the porch swayed slightly, though there was still no wind. Something about the black smoke rising from the chimney felt wrong. Thick, unnatural, like it was absorbing the light around it. I reached the door. It was slightly ajar, creaking softly as I pushed it open. The inside was dark, wooden walls coated in a thin layer of frost. The fireplace was cold, though soot covered the back like someone had been burning a fire recently. Then I noticed the footprints. Not human, elongated, 3-toed, partially melted into the snow, tracked in from the porch straight to the hearth. I froze. My heart raced. A scratching sound echoed from the loft above. "Daniel?" I called softly. No answer. The scratching grew louder, rhythmic, almost intelligent. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but I had come too far. I grabbed a flashlight and climbed the ladder to the loft. The beam landed on a small cot and a notebook. Daniel's handwriting was scrawled across the pages, panic evident in every stroke. It ended abruptly mid-sentence. "They are watching. I can hear them breathing through the walls. The final words were smeared with blood. I spun toward the sound of scraping again, not upstairs, but directly beneath me in the floorboards. I hesitated, flashlight trembling in my hands. The scratching beneath the floorboards stopped, replaced by a faint whisper, barely audible, like it came from the wood itself. "Help. Help me." The voice was Daniel's. I dropped to my knees, pressing my ear against the floor. The sound repeated, almost pleading. My stomach churned. Something alive, or once alive, was trapped under this cabin. The wind outside howled, but the voice remained steady, echoing softly. They are here, watching. Suddenly, a loud thud from the roof made me jump. The loft above creaked violently. Shadows shifted in the corners of the room, though I couldn't see anything solid. I grabbed my jacket and searched the loft more carefully. Among scattered papers, I found a small, carved symbol in the wood floor. The same one Daniel had drawn in his notebook. It was jagged, almost skeletal, as if someone, or something, had etched it carefully. A chill ran through me. I realized then that the cabin itself wasn't abandoned. It was alive with something watching, something waiting for its prey. A shadow flitted past the window, too quick to identify. Something outside was circling, patient and deliberate. And it wasn't human. I descended from the loft cautiously, clutching my flashlight like a weapon. The whispering had grown louder, almost chanting now. My heart thumped in my chest. Every step toward the door felt like walking through thick syrup. Outside, the snow had shifted. Footprints had appeared around the cabin in a perfect circle, not random, deliberate, surrounding the structure. Whoever, or whatever, had made them knew I was inside. I tried the door. Locked. Not by a human hand, I realized, but something much heavier, stronger. I shook it. Nothing. Then came the scratching again, louder, directly under my feet. A shadow flickered across the walls as the floorboards warped slightly, as if breathing. I realized I was trapped, completely alone at the mercy of something that had already studied me, learned my habits, my fear. The whispering turned into murmurs, phrases I couldn't understand, yet every syllable felt like it burrowed into my mind. My flashlight flickered, and for a second, I thought I saw Daniel's face pressed against the floorboards, pale and contorted. Then he was gone. I stumbled backward, trying to catch my balance, and the flashlight illuminated the far corner. A dark, elongated figure emerging from the shadow. Tall, thin, faceless. Limbs unnaturally long, bending in impossible ways. I froze. It tilted its head toward me, observing, calculating. Fear overtook caution. I grabbed my coat and shoved past the figure, bolting for the door. My hands fumbled with the latch, and the second I opened it, the world outside seemed unreal. The footprints that had circled the cabin were now moving toward me, pacing, sliding across the snow silently. The fog in the clearing thickened unnaturally, swallowing light and depth, making it impossible to see. I ran toward the tree line, but the shadow followed, gliding, silent, limbs bending as if gravity didn't apply. My lungs burned, my legs ached. The cold bit through every layer of clothing. Behind me, the whispering returned, louder, more urgent, echoing in the trees themselves. Don't leave. Don't leave. I stumbled and fell, scraping my palms on ice and snow. When I looked up, the shadow was closer than before, motionless, yet undeniably alive. I clawed my way to my feet, heart hammering. Somehow, I forced myself forward, finally reaching the trailhead. Behind me, the cabin's windows glowed black, the carved symbols now illuminated faintly, as if watching me leave. But I knew better than to feel safe. The forest had marked me. It had learned my fear, and it would be waiting for me whenever I returned. The forest wasn't empty. Every step I took on the snowy trail felt observed. Trees groaned as if leaning in to watch. My boots left tracks, but every few seconds I could swear I saw extra prints, too long, too narrow, weaving alongside mine. I tried calling out Daniel's name, but only my own voice returned. The whispering followed, indistinct syllables carried by the wind, mocking, echoing, taunting. A shadow flitted between the trees. Not a bear, not a moose, something upright, impossibly tall, limbs bending at wrong angles. It didn't run. It glided, silent, waiting for me to slip. I stumbled onto a frozen creek. My reflection in the ice was distorted, elongated. And for a heartbeat, I thought I saw Daniel's face staring back, pale, frozen in terror. I snapped my head up. The shadow moved closer. Panic surged. I ran blindly, crashing through snow-laden branches, breath freezing in my lungs. I tripped and rolled down a small embankment, my body slammed against ice and roots. Pain radiated through me, but I dared not stop. Above, the whispering turned into a low chant, echoing in the valley. And then I realized I wasn't running from one. I was running from many. I reached the frozen creek, hoping to follow it downstream to a ranger's trail. The ice groaned under my weight. My legs burned from exertion and fear. That's when I saw them. Dozens of pale figures scattered across the frozen water, some standing, some crouched unnaturally. Their limbs bent in impossible angles. Their faces were featureless, smooth, save for glinting black eyes that reflected the dim light. I froze. They weren't moving yet, simply watching, as though the forest itself had spawned them to judge me. I tried to back away, but the ice beneath me cracked sharply. The sound made them stir. They tilted their heads in unison, clicking noises resonating through the valley. I scrambled across the ice, slipping, sliding, my mind screaming to keep moving. I knew one misstep could be fatal. Suddenly, one figure darted toward me, faster than any human could move. I dove to the snowbank. The figure collided with the ice with a sickening crack, then vanished like smoke. I realized then, the forest wasn't just haunted. It was alive. It was hunting. And I had wandered too far into its domain. After what felt like hours, I stumbled onto a narrow trail. I could see a faint building through the trees, a small ranger outpost. Relief surged, but my legs trembled, barely able to hold me upright. Inside, the cabin was warm, lights flickering weakly. I collapsed into a chair, shivering uncontrollably. A radio crackled, and I screamed into it for help. A voice responded, calm, professional. "Who is this?" I tried to explain, but the words faltered. As I glanced out the window, my stomach sank. The forest edge was alive with shadows. They didn't move toward the cabin, not yet. They simply watched, standing like statues among the trees. The operator asked if I was okay. I didn't answer. My eyes were fixed on the tree line, knowing that I had survived. For now. The whispers returned, faint, carried on the wind. "You can leave, for now. But we never forget." I realized that Daniel, and those who came before, weren't just missing. They were marked. And Bear Creek Valley never let go. The operator assured me a rescue team was on the way. I felt a brief moment of hope. But when I checked my jacket, my blood ran cold. There, across my chest, was a faint, jagged symbol pressed into the fabric. The same one Daniel had drawn in his notebook and carved into the cabin floor. It was impossible. I had not touched anything, had not even been outside after leaving the cabin. The whispering returned, closer now, almost inside my head. Marked, always marked. "You belong to the forest now." The cabin walls seemed to breathe with cold, and the shadows at the tree line shifted subtly, watching, patient. Even as the rescue team arrived, I knew it wouldn't end. This place didn't forget. It didn't forgive. I was lucky to escape physically, but the forest had claimed me, and the marks, they would follow me. The rescue team led me back to the road. The forest behind me looked calm, peaceful under moonlight. But I knew better. The whispers never left entirely. At night, when the wind shifted, I could hear faint scraping, like fingers running along wood and ice. I sometimes wake to see shadowy figures at the edge of my property, tall, pale, impossible limbs bending unnaturally. I don't go near Bear Creek Valley anymore. I don't hike alone. But the marks, the forest knows I exist. It waits. And I know deep in my gut that one day, if I step back into the snow, into the trees, it will reclaim me, as it did Daniel. Because in Alaska, some forests don't just hide secrets. They hunt, and they never forget the fear they leave behind. My name is Mark, and I've been driving Alaska's Dalton Highway for years, hauling freight trucks in winter storms. I know the road, the ice, and the dangers. Or at least I thought I did. It was early January, and a heavy blizzard had just passed, leaving the highway coated in a slick layer of ice. Visibility was almost zero. My rig's headlights cut only a few dozen feet into the whiteness. The radio crackled occasionally with distant truckers reporting icy patches and wildlife sightings. About 40 miles from Coldfoot, I spotted something unusual. A vehicle parked on the side, engine off, lights dark. A lone figure waved desperately, half hidden in the blowing snow. It looked human, but something about its stance felt off. Rigid, jerky. I slowed and stopped. My instincts screamed, "Don't," but I pulled over anyway. The figure came closer. I could see frost on its hair, ice clinging to its clothes, and a pale face, frozen almost unnaturally still. Its eyes were wide, unblinking, staring straight at me. "Please, help me," the person whispered, voice breaking. I opened the door to help them into my truck, but before I could reach them, they stepped aside. I realized too late. There was nothing under their feet. They weren't walking, they were gliding over the ice, perfectly smooth, silently. A chill ran through me. Something wasn't right. I froze in place, staring at the pale figure gliding effortlessly over the ice. My breath fogged the cab's window. It stopped just short of my truck and tilted its head slightly, unblinking. "Don't," it whispered. Its voice was hollow, echoing unnaturally like it came from the wind itself. "Don't go. Further." I stepped back, heart hammering. Who are you?" The figure's lips moved, but no sound came. Then it raised one hand and pointed ahead, down the icy highway, into the white void. My stomach sank. Something ahead moved, or at least I thought I saw movement. Shadows shifted over the ice, growing darker and wider with every second. A low, resonating hum filled the air, vibrating the frozen truck cab. The figure's eyes locked on mine, pleading, almost desperate. Then, with unnatural speed, it slid sideways and vanished into the storm. I was alone again. The hum grew louder, like the ice itself was groaning. My truck's heater failed suddenly, freezing the cab's interior in seconds. Something was waiting on the highway. Something invisible, yet immense. I gripped the wheel, trying to convince myself it was my imagination. But the ice ahead was smooth and black, impossibly still, except for a series of indentations, like massive footprints pressed into the frozen road. And they were heading straight for me. I forced myself to move. The tires crunched over frost as I drove slowly, eyes scanning the horizon. The black footprints continued for miles ahead, perfectly spaced, too large to be human, yet unmistakably deliberate. The storm intensified. My headlights cut through only a few feet of white. and each reflection on the ice seemed distorted, like shadows stretching toward me. Suddenly, my radio squawked. A distorted voice murmured my name. My heart jumped. I slammed on the brakes, skidding across the ice. No other vehicles, no people. Then came a sound, a low, wet scraping along the ice. Something enormous was moving just beyond visibility, silent but deliberate, following my path. Panic overtook reason. I tried to accelerate, but the tires spun uselessly on the black ice. Every instinct screamed to abandon the truck and run, but there was no running on this frozen wasteland. A shadow flickered ahead, too fast, too wide. Something colossal had broken through the storm, following the highway perfectly, keeping pace with me without a single noise. I realized then, I wasn't just lost. I was being hunted by something ancient, patient, and impossibly strong. My hands shook on the steering wheel. The black footprints grew closer, the scraping noise louder, echoing off the frozen landscape. Then I saw it, just for a split second. A massive, pale, humanoid figure. Limbs twisted in unnatural angles, gliding just above the ice. Its head was featureless, but the sheer size made it impossible to mistake for a human. Its presence warped the light, casting distorted shadows across the snow. I swerved violently, nearly losing control. My headlights flickered, revealing another figure behind it, identical, moving silently, endlessly, like it had been waiting for me. The hum from before returned, vibrating through my bones. My stomach churned. Every instinct screamed to escape. But the ice refused me traction. The figures glided effortlessly, keeping pace no matter what. I realized the worst part. They weren't chasing recklessly. They were herding me, corralling me into a trap somewhere down the frozen highway. My radio squawked again, this time clearer. But the words weren't human. Whispers, repeated endlessly, calling my name over and over. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles cracked, eyes wide, praying for any sign of civilization. But the snow stretched endlessly, and the figures kept coming. Desperation pushed me forward. Ahead, the road curved toward a canyon. Bear Creek ice caves, a place truckers avoided in winter. I knew it was dangerous, but the alternative was being hunted across an endless frozen highway. The caves yawned like a dark mouth, walls glistening with frost. I drove into the first cavern, headlights revealing icy stalagmites and shadows that seemed to move independently. And then I saw them, multiple figures, gliding silently across the ice. Their black eyes glimmered in the dim light. They weren't attacking yet, just waiting, surrounding me slowly, circling like predators. The hum reached a deafening level, vibrating my chest. I realized that stopping meant certain death. I gunned the engine, hoping the cave would spit me out into daylight. The figures didn't chase. They just slid alongside, perfectly keeping pace, their long limbs bending impossibly around the jagged ice formations. I knew the moment I left the cave, I would never truly escape. They were patient. They were eternal. They waited, always watching, along the frozen highways of Alaska. My only hope was to survive the night and pray daylight broke before they claimed me completely. I emerged from the ice cave into the snow-choked canyon. My heart pounded, hands numb on the steering wheel. The storm outside had worsened, and visibility was nearly zero. The figures were gone, or so I thought. Shadows stretched along the cliffs beside the highway, moving unnaturally. I couldn't tell if they were gliding, climbing, or simply appearing where they wanted. My truck skidded on black ice, tires spinning, but somehow I regained control. The whispering returned, closer, surrounding me in the wind. I tried to call the radio, but only static answered. Then, a distorted voice whispered, "You can't leave?" A pale figure suddenly rose from the snowbank on the side of the road. Its limbs bent unnaturally, taller than any human, and its head tilted in a way that seemed impossible. I floored the accelerator. The tires clawed at the ice desperately. The figure glided alongside, matching my speed effortlessly. My stomach lurched. I realized it didn't run. It never needed to. I prayed for the canyon to end, for the road to curve into safety, for daylight, for anything. And then, up ahead, I saw a faint glow. Headlights. Another truck. Salvation, maybe. Or just another way to lure me into the storm. I slammed on the brakes to avoid colliding with the oncoming truck. Its headlights cut through the blizzard, illuminating the icy highway and the frozen landscape. But relief didn't last. The other driver waved frantically, but there was no figure in the cab. Just shadows moving unnaturally. The truck slowly reversed, moving as though alive, following my path perfectly. The pale figures returned from the snowbanks, gliding silently, their black eyes reflecting the headlights. I realized then, they weren't hunting alone. The highway itself was alive. They commanded it, controlled it. The hum returned, louder than before, vibrating through the frozen ground and my bones. I gripped the wheel as the truck ahead slid sideways unnaturally, blocking the exit. I had no choice but to steer into a snowbank to avoid collision. The cold bit through my clothing. The figures moved in closer, circling like predators. For the first time, I felt truly trapped. The highway was no longer a road. It was a labyrinth, and I was the prey. The blizzard intensified. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Snow whipped against the windshield, freezing instantly. I could feel the ice beneath the tires cracking faintly with every turn. The figures emerged again from the storm, gliding silently, black eyes glowing faintly. They didn't attack, not yet. They just watched, herding me along the narrow, icy road. I realized the figures weren't natural. They didn't follow the laws of physics. Limbs bent impossibly, bodies moved with fluidity that made me dizzy to watch. Suddenly, I heard a scraping sound, louder than before, coming from beneath the truck. I looked down and froze. The ice itself was shifting, forming faint outlines of massive feet, matching the size and stride of the figures above. I knew I wasn't just on the highway. I was on their hunting ground. Panic seized me. The hum rose to a deafening level. My headlights flickered, and in that instant, I swore I saw Daniel. Another missing trucker, gliding among the shadows, pale, eyes black, beckoning me forward. I floored the accelerator. Survival was the only option. The dawn was just breaking. Orange and gray light filtered weakly through the storm. I dared a glance behind. The shadows lingered, following at a distance, keeping pace. The black footprints stretched endlessly, yet no matter how fast I drove, they never faded. The highway ahead seemed normal, but I knew better. Suddenly, the figures appeared directly in front of me, gliding silently across the ice. I swerved sharply, nearly tipping the truck. My heart raced. I realized then that daylight didn't matter. They thrived in the storm, the ice, and the frozen silence. They were patient, eternal, and they knew the road better than any human. I managed to reach a ranger station at the highway's end. My hands shook violently as I staggered inside. The rangers stared at me like I was insane, and the storm outside was gone. But the marks remained. The hum never fully left. I had survived, But the highway had claimed something from me. My peace, my certainty, my safety. And I knew I would never drive alone in Alaska again. Even now, months later, I dream of the highway. In my nightmares, the snow glows black and figures glide silently across it, their eyes reflecting my fear. Sometimes I wake to faint scraping sounds, like claws on ice, even hundreds of miles away from Alaska. The highway doesn't forget. The forest doesn't forget. The storm doesn't forgive. I survived, yes, but something followed me back. Something patient, watching, waiting. Every icy wind reminds me. The figures are still there. Gliding, herding, hunting. If you ever drive the frozen highways of Alaska, remember this. Some roads are alive. Some paths are never meant to be walked or driven alone. And if you see shadows gliding over the ice, don't stop. Don't look back. Just keep moving, because they never forget their prey. My name is Lisa, and I've always been drawn to abandoned places. Alaska's Denali National Park is full of secrets, but nothing prepared me for the forgotten mine. I had driven hours on a dirt road, past frozen rivers and towering pines, following coordinates I'd found in an old miner's journal. The entrance appeared suddenly, a jagged black hole carved into the mountainside, framed by rusted beams and warning signs half buried in snow. The air smelled of metal, rot, and something faintly sweet, like decaying pine needles. My boots crunched on the frozen soil as I approached. Inside, the darkness swallowed everything. I switched on my flashlight. The beam cut through decades of dust and frost, illuminating tracks in the mud. Human-sized, but some oddly elongated, almost inhuman. I descended cautiously, feeling the walls hum beneath my fingertips. The journal had warned of accidents, miners disappearing without a trace. But I hadn't expected this. A sudden scrape echoed from deep within the mine. My pulse jumped. I shone the flashlight toward the sound, but nothing moved. Then I saw them. Shadows at the far end, fleeting glimpses of figures hunched over, moving in jerky, unnatural motions. Their faces were obscured, but their presence radiated something hungry, desperate, and angry. I took a shaky breath. I should have turned back. I should have left. But curiosity drove me deeper. The deeper I went, the colder it became. My flashlight barely penetrated the thick darkness, reflecting off jagged walls encrusted with ice and rust. Every sound I made echoed, but not naturally. Some echoes were delayed, as if bouncing back from another dimension entirely. I followed a narrow tunnel, my breath steaming in the frigid air. The elongated footprints continued, sometimes overlapping mine, almost taunting me. Scratches marked the walls, some deep enough to reveal pale wood beneath. Others scorched black as though clawed with fire. Then I heard it, a soft, wet, slapping sound, like something pacing just out of sight. I froze, holding my flashlight high. A figure darted across the beam, limbs bent unnaturally, moving like a puppet with snapped strings. Its face was hidden, but I felt its eyes boring into me. I tried to call out, but my voice caught in my throat. The journal's warnings replayed in my mind. Miners disappearing, never found. Their screams carried by the mountain wind for days. Another sound, a dragging, wet scrape, came from behind. I spun, shining my light. Nothing. But the air felt heavier, oppressive, as if the mine itself was breathing. I knew then I wasn't alone. I was being watched, hunted, and studied by whatever had taken the miners before me. I stumbled into a wider chamber, old timber supports sagging under the weight of ice and snow above. The smell of rust and decay was almost suffocating. Then the ground trembled slightly. Dust fell from the ceiling. I froze. A low groaning sound echoed from somewhere deeper, like the mountain itself was waking. I followed the tunnel further and came upon a collapsed shaft. Wooden beams jutted at odd angles, some frozen in place, others splintered. My flashlight caught something glinting. A miner's helmet, cracked and frozen in the ice, with faint streaks of dark red frozen in the frost. A sudden movement in the shadows made me gasp. A figure, impossibly tall, limbs contorted, emerged from behind the beams, its head tilted unnaturally as if surveying me. I stumbled backward, nearly falling into the frozen debris. The journal's last entry played in my mind. Do not descend after dark. They are patient. They wait. I realized then the mine wasn't abandoned. Something still lived here, feeding off fear, time, and those foolish enough to enter. I had to keep moving, deeper, or I'd be trapped forever. The tunnel widened again, old rails half buried in ice. My flashlight glinted off metal, revealing faint scratches and twisted shapes frozen mid-motion. I sensed movement, many movements, in the corners of my vision. Then the figures appeared, emerging from the walls themselves, pale and featureless. Some crouched unnaturally, others glided across the ice-slick floor. Their limbs bent at impossible angles, yet they moved with terrifying fluidity. One figure stopped a few feet from me, head tilted. The air felt heavier, thick with a cold that seeped into my bones. I could hear whispers, almost imperceptible, like miners calling my name, begging me to leave. I backed away, my heart hammering. The tunnel curved ahead. I could see a faint light, the exit, yet every step closer seemed to drag me further into the shadows. Suddenly, one figure lunged, not at me directly, but toward the light. The other figures followed in perfect coordination, like a hunting pack guiding their prey. I realized then, the mine wasn't just haunted. It was alive. Every shadow, every echo, every freeze of air was a trap designed to break my mind before my body. I reached a chamber with walls lined in frost-covered ore. The whispers intensified, circling my head like a living storm. The temperature plummeted suddenly, breath freezing instantly in the beam of my flashlight. Then it came. The closest figure yet, towering over me, head tilted unnaturally, limbs bending like broken timber. Its face was smooth and featureless, yet I felt it looking directly into my soul. I stumbled backward, hitting the wall. The figure followed, gliding silently, every step perfectly measured. The ice beneath my feet cracked faintly. My mind screamed to run, but the tunnel narrowed. I glimpsed movement behind, more figures, each grotesque and unnatural, circling me slowly. The hum began again, low at first, then rising, vibrating the walls in my chest. I fumbled for my journal, trying to recall any advice, any hint on how to survive. But the pages seemed useless now. The air grew dense, thick with frost, and I realized with a sinking horror that leaving this chamber alive would require more than courage. The figures had me trapped, and I had no choice but to descend further into the forgotten mine, deeper into their lair. With only my flashlight and willpower to guide me, I pressed onward, deeper into the mine, the flashlight flickering as the hum of the figures surrounded me. The tunnel opened into a vast cavern. The walls glittered with frost-covered ore, but the beauty was deceptive. Shadows moved independently of each other, gliding along the walls, sometimes disappearing only to reappear in a different corner. The whispers became louder, forming faint syllables I couldn't understand, yet somehow felt. My chest tightened, as if the mine itself was compressing me. making each breath impossible. Suddenly, I saw something carved into the ice. Symbols, jagged and dark, resembling the scratches I had seen in the previous chambers. They pulsed faintly, as if alive. A figure emerged directly in front of me. Taller than any human, its featureless face reflected the faint light like a mirror. It raised an arm slowly, pointing to a narrow passage descending even further into darkness. I understood. It wanted me to go deeper. Fear surged, but curiosity and survival instincts collided. If I didn't continue, I might never leave. I stepped forward, my boots crunching on frost. The whispers seemed to follow each step, growing louder, now urgent, pleading, ominous. The mine had chosen me. The passage narrowed. I shone my flashlight on the walls and froze. Dozens of frozen figures were pressed against the rock. Miners, some half submerged in ice, faces contorted in terror. Their hands were clawing at the walls, and their eyes, some open, some shut, seemed to watch me even in death. I swallowed hard. The journal had mentioned miners vanishing, but this was something else. These weren't simply dead. They were frozen alive, part of the mine now. A low scrape echoed from behind me. I turned. A new figure emerged, tall, pale, limbs bending impossibly, gliding silently over the frozen floor. Its black eyes locked on mine. I tried to step back, but the ground beneath cracked slightly, frost splintering like glass. The scraping sound grew louder, closer, surrounding me in a circle of ice. Panic surged. I realized the figures weren't just watching, they were herding me, guiding me deeper towards something they had prepared. And I knew the truth. Once you enter the forgotten mine, it doesn't just trap your body, it traps your mind. The passage opened into a massive chamber, the heart of the mine. Ice stalagmites jutted from the ground, glowing faintly from some unknown source. The air was dense, heavy, filled with the hum of unseen beings. The figures surrounded me, forming a loose circle. They didn't speak, but the oppressive presence pressed on me from all directions. My breath came in ragged gasps. Every exhale crystallized instantly in the frigid air. In the center of the chamber, I saw something terrifying. A pit carved deep into the ice, filled with pale, contorted bodies, moving just slightly, twitching as if aware. The mine itself seemed to pulse with life, feeding off fear. One figure stepped forward, towering above me. Its limbs bent unnaturally, black eyes glowing faintly. Then, the whispers rose into a chorus, urgent, commanding, echoing off every icy surface. I understood. This was their domain. The miners, the shadows, the whispers, all part of the mine's will. And I was the newest guest. I had to escape. Somehow, I ran, boots slipping on the icy floor, every step echoing unnaturally. The figures moved silently, herding me toward twisting tunnels, corners, and dead ends. My flashlight flickered, leaving me in partial darkness. I tripped, hitting my head against ice, vision swimming. When I came to, I was surrounded. Figures glided silently, arms bending impossibly, faces featureless, eyes black and unblinking. The hum vibrated through my bones. I realized the mine knew every move I would make. Every step, every attempt to escape had been anticipated. I sprinted again, following a narrow passage I had glimpsed earlier. The figures didn't follow immediately. They waited, patient, silent, herding me like prey into a trap I could feel closing. The exit was close. Light seeped faintly through cracks in the ice. I had to reach it before the figures decided otherwise. I burst into daylight, gasping as the cold hit me fully. Snow crunched under my boots as I ran toward my truck. Behind me, the mine entrance looked innocuous, as though nothing had emerged. But I knew better. I could still feel their presence. Patient, eternal, watching. When I reached the truck, I noticed it. A faint, jagged symbol etched into the hood. Not there before. The mark pulsed faintly, black against the white snow. I drove away as fast as I could, but even miles from the mine, I could hear the low hum in my chest. The forgotten mind hadn't let me go. Not really. And I knew, in my heart, it never would. Some places in Alaska don't just trap your body, they trap your soul. My name is David, and I've been a wilderness guide in Alaska for over a decade. I know the forests, the mountains, the rivers, and their hidden dangers. But nothing prepared me for the vanishing cabin. It was mid-November, the edge of winter already settling over the landscape. I had taken a detour to explore a remote trail near Denali, following GPS coordinates from an old map I had found in a ranger's archive. The trail was overgrown, choked with frost-bitten brush. But something drew me deeper, like a whisper in the wind. Hours later, as the sun dipped below the jagged horizon, I saw it. A small log cabin tucked between two snow-covered pines. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney. Relief washed over me. Shelter, warmth, safety. I approached cautiously, noticing the faint glow of firelight flickering through the frosted windows. But the air felt wrong, too still. The forest had fallen silent. No birds, no wind, just an oppressive quiet that pressed on my chest. I stepped onto the porch. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Inside, the cabin was furnished, a table, chairs, a small fireplace. Everything looked normal, except there was no dust, no decay, and there were footprints in the snow leading away from the door, but none leading to it. A sudden draft chilled me. I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut. And I realized, too late. I wasn't alone. I froze, heart hammering, staring at the closed door. A soft creak echoed from somewhere above. Footsteps, but too light to belong to a human. My flashlight illuminated the room, but nothing moved. Yet the oppressive feeling of being watched pressed down on me. I stepped toward the fireplace, trying to convince myself it was just the wind. That's when I saw it. A shadow darting across the far wall, flickering unnaturally. My pulse quickened. I called out, "Hello?" No answer. Just silence. Then I noticed scratches on the wooden floor, shallow but deliberate, forming patterns that seemed almost deliberately chaotic, as if someone, or something, was trying to communicate. The air felt thick, charged with anticipation, and my breath came in short, misted bursts. I moved to the window, hoping to see the forest outside, but the view was wrong. The trees weren't where they should have been, and the snow seemed to shift subtly, like the landscape itself was alive. A whisper grazed my ear, faint but unmistakable. "Leave, before it's too late." I spun around, but the cabin was empty. The fireplace flickered, but no one was near. And the door had no handle on the inside. I was trapped, alone. I backed away from the window, trying to keep my composure. The room suddenly felt smaller. The walls, which had seemed solid moments before, now appeared to shimmer, faintly pulsing like they weren't fully there. I rushed to the door, tugging at it, but it didn't budge. The cabin groaned under its own weight, floorboards creaking as if alive. My flashlight flickered, revealing a faint outline in the corner, a figure crouched, featureless, pale, watching me. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. The shadow didn't move, but the air around it vibrated with a low hum, like a warning. Then, in the reflection of the fireplace, I saw the cabin behind me, stretching infinitely, walls bending unnaturally, corners that should not exist. I realized the cabin was not bound by normal dimensions. Time and space warped inside, and the figure, whatever it was, seemed perfectly at home. A soft scratching echoed from the ceiling. Something above me was moving, climbing. The air grew colder with each second, frosting forming on my eyelashes. Panic clawed at my chest. I had no idea how to escape. The cabin wasn't just alive. It was hunting me. A sudden movement made me spin. The figure lunged, not with hands or claws, but with an invisible force, pushing me against the wall. I gasped for breath, struggling to regain control. The shadow hovered, its presence pressing in, impossible to ignore. It whispered in a hollow voice, "You shouldn't have come." I tried to reason, to calm myself, but the air was heavy, suffocating. The door rattled violently, yet still would not open. Footsteps echoed above, then behind me, circling silently. Desperate, I grabbed a chair, swinging it at the figure. My hands passed through air, through it. But it recoiled slightly, as though my intent had been noticed. That was enough for me to run. I darted toward the fireplace, hoping for another exit. The chimney loomed like a yawning mouth. Then I heard it, my own name, whispered over and over, faint, distorted from every direction. It dawned on me. The cabin knew me. It had been waiting, observing, and now it wanted me trapped forever. I forced myself outside through a window I hadn't noticed before. Snow crunched beneath my boots, but the forest had changed. Trees were twisted, elongated, and the trail I had followed to the cabin was gone. The cabin itself flickered. One moment solid logs and smoke from the chimney, the next just a faint shimmer in the snowy woods. The figure emerged from the shadows, standing between me and the path back. I froze. Its featureless face tilted slightly, black eyes unblinking. It glided forward effortlessly, silently, herding me deeper into the forest. I tried to run, but the snow shifted, forming ridges that slowed me down. The trees moved subtly, branches curling toward me like fingers. Every instinct screamed to flee, but the landscape refused to let me escape. I realized then the truth. The vanishing cabin didn't just trap people inside. It warped the world around them, bending reality until there was nowhere left to run. I had no choice but to keep moving, or become another permanent resident of its twisted domain. I forced myself forward, moving through the twisted forest. Every step seemed to take me further from reality. Snow shifted beneath my feet, forming unnatural patterns, almost guiding me along a path I didn't want to follow. The cabin flickered behind me, appearing and disappearing in the trees. Its smoke curled impossibly, moving against the wind. The shadow followed silently, gliding, never tiring. I could feel its attention, a cold, suffocating awareness that pierced my chest. I stumbled upon a frozen stream, its surface reflecting dozens of distorted versions of myself. Each reflection twisted my features into masks of terror. One by one, the figures blinked, then disappeared. I realized the cabin wasn't just warping the forest. It was warping me, bending my perception, playing with my mind. A whisper echoed from everywhere and nowhere. "You cannot leave. Not yet." Panic clawed at me. I tried to retrace my steps, but the trees had shifted. The snow was unbroken, except for my own footprints. Yet even they seemed distorted, leading me deeper. Somewhere in the distance, I heard a faint laugh, hollow and human, but impossibly wrong. The vanishing cabin had begun to claim my reality. and I feared the forest itself would never let me go. The laughter grew louder, echoing unnaturally through the twisted forest. I stumbled, falling into deep snow. The shadow hovered above, unmoving, its black eyes unblinking, watching my every struggle. Branches reached toward me like grasping hands. My breath came in short, frozen puffs. I realized the laughter belonged to someone, or something trapped inside the cabin. Perhaps the previous victims, their essence absorbed, warped into this nightmare. I ran again, but the forest seemed endless. Every landmark I recognized had vanished. The cabin appeared and disappeared at random intervals, a lure, a predator, a trap. I tried to scream, but my voice was muffled, absorbed by the snow and trees. The whispers merged with the laughter, forming a chorus of distorted voices. "You cannot leave. Join us." Fear surged. I knew that if I stopped, the forest would claim me. My mind raced, searching for any rational explanation. But the vanishing cabin had dissolved reason entirely. Then I saw a faint glimmer of daylight, a possible escape. But between me and it, the shadow raised its arm, gesturing toward the cabin. Its movement was deliberate, a command I could not ignore. I sprinted toward the faint daylight, heart hammering, lungs burning. The snow was uneven, ridges forming to slow me. Behind, the shadow glided silently, never losing distance. The daylight grew stronger. I thought, hoped, I had reached the forest edge. Relief surged, but the forest shifted. Trees warped and twisted, leaving me in the same endless maze. The cabin reappeared before me, perfectly still, smoke curling as though mocking my attempt to escape. I noticed subtle changes. The snow beneath my feet glittered unnaturally, and the air hummed, resonating in my chest. My reflection in a frozen pool revealed the truth. My features were slightly altered, paler, eyes wider, expression permanently haunted. I realized the cabin didn't just trap people physically, it altered them, warping their essence to become part of its domain. Each person who entered became another echo, another whisper, another shadow in its control. I had survived. But already I could feel the changes. Desperation took over. I charged toward the cabin, ignoring fear, hoping to confront whatever force bound me. The door was still closed, smoke curling in impossible patterns. As I touched the logs, the shadow appeared at my side, taller, impossibly thin. I froze. Its presence pressed into my mind, whispering my deepest fears, revealing secrets I had never shared with anyone. Suddenly, the door creaked open, revealing the interior, empty, except for faint outlines of previous victims, etched into the frost-covered floor. They moved subtly, watching, warning, urging me to leave. I stepped inside. The shadow followed, but stopped at the threshold. It tilted its head, unblinking, and I understood. The cabin didn't need to kill. The fear, the isolation, the mind games. That was its power. I ran through the cabin, exiting the back door into a narrow clearing. The snow here was untouched, pristine. The shadow didn't follow. I was free for now. I finally stumbled onto a trail I recognized, back toward civilization. The cabin was gone, leaving only snow and trees. But I could still feel it watching, waiting, patient. Weeks later, I dreamt of the cabin every night. In each dream, it appeared in a different place, always just out of reach, always drawing me back. The forest around it shimmered unnaturally, filled with shadows and whispers. I survived, yes. But the vanishing cabin had left its mark, not on my body, but on my mind. I now see it everywhere, in the shape of snowdrifts, in twisted trees, in the faintest reflection in glass. If you ever wander Alaska's remote forests and stumble upon a small log cabin, smoke curling from its chimney, do not approach. Do not knock. Do not look inside. Because some cabins do not want to be found. And if they choose you, they will never let go.